Hi guys, my name's Callum and today I'm going to be working with Hyway chainsaw parts to bring you this installation of the big bore kit on my 395 with a pop-up, but I'm probably not going to talk throughout this. I'll just narrate it at the end because I feel like listening to music and I don't really want to deal with YouTube. Alright, so this is my first go at a narration, kind of voiceover thing. So here I'm just checking the compression with my compression tester. I forgot to put the decomp out, so I'm just letting the decomp stay in. Making sure the compression tester is sealed in. I gave it about 8 pulls then, and just the needle stopped moving, and so that pumped up as it was to a little bit under 150 psi. So here, just basic teardown to install this cylinder, basically pulling the cover off and pulling the handle off. Just flatheads on the cover, Allen key screws on the handle, I think 4mm from memory. Just unslot the plug wire as well because that slots into the cover. And then what I'm planning to do, or what I was planning to do, is then just unbolt the muffler, the exhaust, and the cylinder as one piece, keep them all together, and just lift the whole thing up. So you'll see me just tearing things down here. Another side note is that these bottom screws on the handle are actually machine thread. There's a little metal insert in the handle because they get a fair bit of reefing on them. Only imperial bolts on this saw are the muffler bolt, the cylinder bolts. They're 3/16, I think. Allen key. That's what they take. If you wanted to, you could probably swap those out for 5mm. Here I'm just getting the fuel line off, the impulse hose off, the choke off, and then I've forgotten the throttle, so I've just got to get in there. Usually with a pair of long nose pliers is best. And then that just lifted off as one piece. I'm just moving you around here so you get a better view of the workbench. Just cover that with a rag so that it doesn't get dirty, and then basically undo the intake boot. That's just a Phillips flathead screw. Sorry about my arm. So that just comes off as an assembly. Two 10mm bolts hold on the muffler. And then you've got the exhaust gasket, the little heat shield, and I usually double exhaust gasket at one either side of the shield. It's not really mandatory though. And those little bolts have got like a square head, they just slot into the cylinder. You just get your 4mm Allen key and put it into that anti-vibration mount I just took off. It just slides all the way in and you unscrew that. So I've got the new cylinder out, it's got the pop-up, it's really nice quality. So I put that anti-vibration spring and decompression button back in. Yeah, just checking the base gasket fits. get the carburetor on, I had to loosen off the little boot clampy ring a little bit, but once you get that on, it's pretty easy. Make sure you hook up your impulse hose to the little barb on the bottom of the cylinder. I think it's on the bottom of the cylinder on this model. So yeah, that took a fair bit of fiddling around, which it really didn't need to, but I got it on in the end, so that's all that matters. That little clampy ring can be quite a hindrance sometimes on all saws. Just putting a couple of little zip ties to hold the impulse hose on. That's totally not necessary, but I do that. Yeah. Ports look pretty good, so you slip those bolts in and then make sure your gaskets are lining up. And I'm not sure what I'm doing here. Yeah, so I'm back. So I've got the Hyway muffler. They sent me out how to go at moving the baffle around inside. It's kind of hit and miss. And with this, you want to actually, what I made the mistake of fully tightening down those 10mm bolts. You want to just kind of leave them loose, and then that way the muffler doesn't get in the way when you're trying to sit the cylinder down. So then I've just cleaned up the cases a little bit, pull the circlips out, and knock out the wrist pin, take that piston off, then put a little bit of lube back on the wrist pin bearing, put the new piston in. I used the original OEM circlips and wrist pin for it because I don't really trust aftermarket wrist pins, etc. Sorry about my head. So yeah, new pistons going in. Make sure the arrow is pointing towards where your exhaust port will be. Ring compressor, push it down. It sat down okay, but I then had to loosen off those muffler bolts to get it to sit down the rest of the way. Then basically everything just bolts on in reverse. Make sure you get your fuel line, your choke, and your throttle all hooked up. Go around in a bit of a star pattern with those bolts. Madly looking for something. Handlebar. And then, again, those screws. The coarse threads go on the sides and the machine threads go underneath. It all just goes up nice and easily. Make sure everything's working before you put your cover back on. Compression, pretty good. Then I just hook up the compression tester. Pull it a couple of times, probably 8 or 9 again, until the needle stops moving. This one maxed out at about 175 psi, and that hasn't been run, so it's not really got any oil or lubrication in the cylinder. Yeah, I'll just let it run couple of days fiddling around with the Hyway 58mm pop-up top end, and I was just finding it was really hard to get it to tune right, and it was always wanting to run kind of rich, and it never really had the up and go. And talking to a couple of my saw friends who are really into like port timing and stuff and all the specifics, apparently that's quite possibly due to the way the 58mm cylinder's design. I'm not sure of the total specifics, but it's something to do with the transfer ports being kind of skinny and not allowing enough fuel through quick enough to get it running right. But anyway, I've decided I'm going to put it back to the 56mm top end and whack a Hyway pop-up in that and see how it goes. And so this, as it was with the Hyway pop-up 58mm, pumped up to I think 170 psi. The way the piston and cylinder were beforehand, it pumped up to 150, so we'll use those as baselines for the next one. So that's pumped up to just about 170. So that's pretty similar to what the big ball was doing. So this is the Hyway pop-up new piston. So that's the Hyway pop-up piston. The original cylinder it had on it, which is a little bit worn out. The ring gap was less than 20 thousandths when I put it in there. Yeah. Yeah. And so I took this into the saw shop and got the guy to tune it properly. And so he has it running about 11,800 at wide open throttle and idling about the 2,900 mark. And I'll just get my Ear Pro and fire it up and let you guys listen to it. Choke. Compression. So yeah, that's running pretty well. It started first pull, which is probably because I've been pulling it a fair bit with the compression tester, so it already had a prime in the crankcase. Yeah.